Hey everybody, welcome to another video. I'm Rich Wilson, founder and filmmaker at Vibe Media, where we help your brand build to an influencer level online presence using filmmaking tools and tips to tell your story.
What's up, guys? I'm Rich Wilson, and here's another episode of Vibe Check, where we talk about electronical things going whoop-de-woo.
No, we're not doing that. No, sorry, no, we're not doing that. Well, in this episode of Vibe Check, we are talking about remakes and reboots, some of our favorites, some of the ones that we are iffy about, and have a great discussion on what we think is, too much when it comes to remakes and reboots. And with that, let's get on with the episode. Hey everybody, welcome to Vibe Check, the show for filmmakers and film enthusiasts. And we are here to talk about remakes. I'm Rich Wilson. We've got Dana, we've got Forrest. We're having fun. You should see us behind the scenes here. Oh my goodness, it's crazy. But we are going to talk about remakes, movie remakes. When's it a good idea? When is it a bad idea? And, let's, I guess, start the discussion on why remake a movie?
Cash cow. The first one did really well, and it's like, okay, this title's gonna get us butts in seats, and it's gonna get tickets bought, so let's just do it.
Mm-hmm. I think the best reason to do a remake would be that if you feel that you can improve upon the original.
Yes,
that's the true genuine.
Right.
That's when it's best to do it.
Right, which is like what I think most people maybe even think of. I think it's a little bit of that too. Definitely.
I think more modern remakes.
More modern remakes.
Yeah.
I would definitely say, and this not only just films, but also this translates into television as well. Some remakes of old TV shows.
I would say actually more so television than movies. There are only a few that we'll definitely get into, as far as we were just having a quick discussion on the difference between a remake and a reboot.
Yeah. So what do you think? Because a remake, reboot what are differences?
I think the biggest difference in a remake is still going to follow pretty much the same story as the original. Maybe some slight changes for the times, but still keeping true to the original. Whereas a reboot...
That'd be like Girl Meets World, where you're taking the same storyline and you're expanding upon it.
Right, okay.
But a reboot would be taking and capitalizing on the nostalgia, maybe, in order to... you're creating in the same universe, but not the same story.
Okay.
So it's a little different in the way that you're utilizing the tools, I guess, of the trade in that instance. I think, I was talking to you guys, one of the perfect examples of a remake is Scarface, Al Pacino's Scarface.
Right.
Most people don't know that that's actually a remake. of Scarface from the 30s. And really the only difference between the original Scarface and the newest one, story-wise, is more that it's cocaine versus dealing with like prohibition and alcohol. Like, in the
Taking
30s,
what was
it was
then and making it more modern in a way.
They changed it to be a little more outlandish, obviously now, but in general, the storyline's still the same. As far as the bones of it, it's and the same character kind of thing. It didn't really change too much on that. So that's kind of the prime example, I would say, of a remake of something here.
Or at least a good example on when to remake a movie.
Or at least a good example of a good remake.
Of a good remake, yes. Yeah.
Because, like you said, nobody knows the 1930s version, at least nowadays, unless you're like a diehard Al Pacino fan. And I think people are kind of missing out on a big opportunity to remake movies made from that time. Instead, they want to remake movies from like the early 2000s or like the late 90s. And it's like, no, let those be.
It's a
what
shorter
they are.
window of remakes.
Remake something that's so old that, needs to have a touch of like color in it, or like a touch of like new camera work or dialogue.
Yeah, like maybe remake
Citizens Kane. Remake Citizens Kane, somebody, please.
Or Citizens Kane, I think is a staple of its own.
I don't think it would remake very well.
I don't think it
wouldn't, but I would like to see somebody do it just for fun.
Yeah.
I think, and then, I guess going into this too, as far as other remakes, I don't know if you consider some of the slasher remakes like Friday, when they went back to Friday the 13th. Is that a reboot or is that a remake?
So it really all depends, because then you look at like
go back to the
Halloween.
origin story.
Well, Halloween has had so many reboots within it. You know, they're like, even the third Halloween movie doesn't even follow any of the previous storylines.
Sure.
And then, you know, you've got like The Niece, but now they've rebooted it with, you know, Jamie Lee Curtis back in it, and it's supposed to pick up where the first one left off. Like, it's expanding back on the same storyline.
That would be like an extended sequel.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm saying that it's more of a reboot for that series, whereas Friday the 13th, they don't really follow the same storyline. They kind of more so just follow the same villain.
Right.
And like the same method. Like it's always like teenage kids. So I feel like it's kind of hard to decipher if it's really just kind of a remake of a remake of a remake within itself at that point, just because it does follow the same method a lot of the times, or if it's just...
Well, and that's why I feel, I guess, film doesn't have too many remakes that I can think of on the top of my head. I think most of the remakes would be in television. And even then, it's almost branching on reboots. Because they are changing it enough to where it's not the same. Like, good example, 90210 and Hawaii 5-0.
Yeah, see, but I would say those are more reboots.
Or well, Hawaii 5-0. How about that, for example? Because it is completely different actors,
right? But
playing
it is practically the same characters, same storyline.
But doing different things. They're playing the same character that was in this.
Yeah,
again, Danny. You know, it's
so that's more of a remake. A reboot, like you said, 90210, or even like Saved by the Bell. I'm not talking about the new Peacock one, because that's more of a sequel reboot. But I'm talking about, like, you know, you have the original Saved by the Bell, and then you had the Saved by the Bell the later years, or you know, like the new class. That was a reboot.
Same with Degrassi.
You know,
all
Degrassi.
that stuff, yeah.
So what about the Scream TV show then? Because that basically changes the entire plot of it. Doesn't follow the original plot of the movie, but it still follows the general method of it's a slasher killer who had something happen to him in the past, and everyone in town is involved in a way.
I would say that's an attempt of a reboot, or a reboot for television. They're rebooting it for a completely different medium versus it'd be different if they went and remade Scream. If they just went and did the exact same thing with just different actors and updated it to be modern cell phone. I guess there's one actually, maybe Dial M for Murder. Is a great example of a remake, because they had the original and then the newer one, it's the exact same storyline. It's just updated with some of the technology. Like the phone is different, or the atrium in the middle of the house is the architecture is different, but it's the exact same story. As far as somebody coming in, going after the babysitter, it's the exact same movie.
Well, so following that, then I feel like I see this now that we're talking about it. There's a lot of foreign films that get remade into Americanized films, like The Ring. That had an entire like 5-movie series in Japan, and then, you know, they remade it with Nicole. Is it Nicole Kidman?
Nicole Kidman, I think, was in The Omen.
Maybe, I don't know.
It's one of the two that look alike.
Yeah.
They all look the same.
Yeah.
But you have like The Ring. You have The Grudge. They just came out with a new Grudge last year, which was horrible. But that was more of like a reboot, because it was rebooting that whole curse, whereas The Ring is a remake because they're completely remaking the storyline but making it more Americanized.
Well, and then it makes me wonder, so let me try to think. I think for television, maybe The Office.
The Office.
The Office is definitely a remake, because they're taking the same plot and just Americanizing it.
Same characters.
Yeah.
Shameless.
Shameless
is also a remake.
Skins. I'm pretty sure there was an American,
maybe.
like, one season, because it was not good.
Blair. I never saw the new Blair Witch. Was that literally a remake, or was it a reboot?
It was a sequel.
Oh,
it was a straight up sequel,
sequel
because it was the brother of the first girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh gosh, what else?
There's a lot of, I think, again, it's more prevalent in television shows. There's a lot of things that get copied. Big Brother, one of my favorite television shows, they do remakes, American versions of it.
Love Island.
Reality shows are very common to see remakes of. MasterChef, you know, all these things that originated in other countries that came here.
Right, you know, just Gordon Ramsay. He has how many different shows? Kitchen Nightmares was in Britain before, and then it came over here in America. Hell's
Wipeout
Kitchen,
and all that stuff, too, is a big,
Oh yeah, like Wipeout is basically just like a remake of like some of the Japanese fun old shows.
Oh yeah.
I know it's not very
they have
plot based or anything on that
American
instance,
American Ninja Warrior was not originated here in America.
No,
No.
that's why they had to throw the word America in there.
Exactly.
No, but I mean, then going back to movies, like you see classic movies like Reservoir Dogs. That is a copy of a film from Japan.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name right now because it's in Japanese, but or like Old Dog?
Old-
That what's his Spike Lee decided to reinterpret.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about. I don't know the
I think it's
the
Old
title
Boy.
of it.
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
Old Boy. Like that was the original version of that was amazing, and then his
Perfect.
reinterpretation garbage.
Perfect example. The girl with the dragon tattoo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
Swedish
literally the
version?
exact same actress, even
Yeah.
in
Love
the
that.
movies.
Just Daniel Craig instead.
and it's just Daniel
Yeah.
Craig instead, and like, but it's the same story, going through the same thing. There's Straw Dogs is another one that was like adapted and very Americanized, but there's
Although I will say, back to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the originals are much better than the American one.
absolutely. Yeah, watch the Danish versions.
Yeah.
It's
Don't
much better.
give the American one a chance.
Well, you know,
They miss out on
it
so
goes
much.
it goes back to what you were saying that a lot of
When is it? Yeah.
yeah
A lot of these foreign films that are already good get re-Americanized into something that
because of the cash
isn't
cow.
deserving of
It's
it.
because hey, it's doing really well overseas. Well, Americans generally, I'm sorry, they're just not interested in foreign films. You know,
I hate
most
culture.
most of the time we're not. Like, we're too dumb and lazy. I'm sorry. Like, this is my personal opinion. We are dumb and lazy to read subtitles or even learn the language
that was
it's
the
in.
biggest thing with Parasite. People didn't want to give that movie a chance because it was all in subtitles.
And I'm guilty of that. I was
know.
guilty of
That's
that.
why I gestured to
and,
you.
And,
See-
I loved it.
Do you think that it would be? Because Parasite, I love it. It's a great film. I don't think it needs to be remade. I
no, I
think
hope
No,
not.
definitely
I
not.
swear to God, if someone does that.
at what point is a remake a good idea for when the culture is different? Because again, like The Office is a great example, or Shameless, where it comes from another region that like has a different humor than America does. And I've watched the British Office a little bit, and
so bland.
it's bland. It's a different type. It's
Yeah.
Monty Python humor. It's different.
Yeah.
It's dry humor versus stupid humor that America has. So remaking The Office was perfect because it was hugely successful. Still, I mean, it's a great version, and I don't think it takes away from the British version. They even did like a crossover at the end
loved
of
that
like
with Ricky
yeah.
Gervais, yeah.
So I think they did enough to be meta about it and realize that they're not ruining anything
Right.
or anything, but you know, is it all right to do that when it's a cultural difference that needs to be changed in order for it to be successful in another country?
I think it's different when it comes to TV shows because TV shows you can adapt and they're more obviously than a 90-minute or 120-minute long movie. I think when the heart and soul of the movie is based in the culture that it was created in, and you're taking that and ruining it and kind of
Changing
almost
it.
whitewashing it
Right.
in a
Yeah.
sense, like you're losing a big part of the story that was the drive and the motive for the character, or created the sense of wonder that you're able to like fall into. Like, look at Pan's Labyrinth. Nobody's touched that. Nobody wants
Yeah.
to remake
It's a
that,
great
but it's
movie.
in Spanish and it's got subtitles, and it's because people know that they can't recreate what Guillermo I can't say his name, Guillermo del Toro created. You just can't. And that's why I have such a big issue with Spike Lee's reinterpretation of Old Dog.
Right.
Is it Old Dog or Old Boy? I can't
I
remember.
don't know.
But it's one of the two, and I'm so sorry. But like that really hurt because he took an amazing story that was founded in like this like culture in Korea where it was like, oh, like the brother and sister were like sleeping together, and it's like very secretive and cutthroat, and he just ruined it. And
Sure.
yeah, like you can't take a movie that's based in that culture and
try to
take
redo
away
it.
that culture,
Right.
Because
Right.
then you've got nothing to work with.
I would love to start seeing actual good remakes, though. Again, I think some of the movies that we've touched on here, I mean, imagine if somebody redid like a Run Lola Run nowadays.
cool.
Like, that'd be a great one to redo.
But
redo.
modernize it with like
modernize
more,
it,
like,
yeah.
newer technology in a way, or like newer transportation methods or issues that people have.
Yeah, and think about, just all those different things that could go wrong with different technology, but still keeping the same kind of story. Obviously, there's little changes you can make, but I think that's kind of where we need to be in that sweet spot, because then we start branching into
Bad
almost
Yeah, just
reboots that are again, we were just talking about Ghostbusters before this, which
or the National Lampoon's thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, and technically, like, so Ghostbusters, I guess, technically is a reboot because they're rebooting the franchise.
Right. But it
but
failed.
But
they
it
were
failed
attempting.
terribly.
They were attempting to do it for the wrong purpose. They were like, we need to redo this with an all-female cast because females are funny.
See, and
and
that's
it's
why
like
I
that's
think
not.
It's like, okay, yes,
It's
how
like,
you
yeah,
need to
you
do
have
that.
funny
Yeah.
females,
Yes.
but them being females is not what makes them funny. Like
Right.
they're just funny individuals.
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
that's where it kind of crosses in between being a reboot and a remake, and it can't decipher what it wants to be because
Right.
it has the same character names, it has the same character arcs a lot of the times. It's got like, oh well, now Liam Hemsworth is like the ditzy female assistant, and
Right.
they still follow the same plot almost.
Practically,
So-
almost to the T.
And then it's like, is this a reboot or is this supposed to just be a remake with an all-female cast? Like, what are you're trying to tell a new story with a new group, but you're not really telling me a new story.
And you don't wonder why they are now coming out with Ghostbusters 3.
I'm not
Like the
surprised at
actual
all.
Ghostbusters 3.
I thought the Ghostbusters 3 was announced before this all-female
no
reboot was.
No,
but
well,
that's-
they announced it, but then they changed it to this all-female
Yeah.
cast.
And then that
that failed. I'm not going to lie. Sorry. But actually not sorry. And then they were like, oh, yeah, no, we're doing Ghostbusters 3 again.
Don't worry,
And
guys.
everybody's coming back
Right.
except for Egon.
Well, and that
RIP.
branches almost on like a sequel. Like, at what point does it change? So my question too. Here's other two examples I would want to ask is, so Freaky Friday, that they just remade with Vince Vaughn and whatever, being like a serial killer.
Right.
Like, it's the same body switching story, but a completely different reason behind it. So
Yeah.
like, is that a remake or a reboot, or
I
is it
s-
a sequel? Is it like?
I think it's a reboot on the trope of body swapping.
Yeah, I agree because like when I think of like remakes, I also think of Parent Trap. Also,
Okay.
you have the Parent Trap that came out in like the 60s,
Yes,
and then you have
uh-huh.
the Parent Trap that came
Exactly.
out with Lindsay Lohan.
Same story. Just,
Same
yeah.
story, practically exactly
Different
the
actors,
same
yeah.
story.
Just more modern.
Just
for
more
the
modern.
times.
So now another example, Jumanji. Because
was-
Jumanji's technically the first remake that they did, or
Yeah.
reboot. It's not directly connected with the first one,
Not
except for
directly,
the
but
fact,
kind of a
except
little
for the
bit.
fact that it's the same game that just
It's
went
the
from
same
board
game.
game to a video game.
I'm
Well,
gonna
they
say
did
reboot.
reference the original movie because the one character was living in Alan's house during that entire
Okay.
time that he was stuck there when he thought he was only there since Tuesday, when it was really 20 years.
So reboot though,
I would
or
say,
a remake with references to.
I would say
the
a
original.
remake / reboot.
I'm gonna have to say reboot on this one just because they don't. It's really hard because they. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it's
I
when-
think I agree with you. It
Yeah,
is
it's
kind
a
of in
remake
between.
/
It tiptoes.
reboot because
It tiptoes on the line.
it rebooted the story with new characters, but it was also a remake because it was the same
'Cause it
game.
references
It
the other-
references
yeah.
the things of the past. As
So
well,
what is that
so-
determining factor? If it's a remake that it doesn't really touch on anything from the other version, like it doesn't
honestly,
hint
I think
towards
a
it,
remake
or
is exactly what you kind of said at the beginning, where a remake is basically same characters, very similar storyline. Yes, it's kind of updated and make it more modernized, but it's like, if we had, it would be almost a carbon remake if the main character was Alan Parrish.
Oh, here's a perfect example. They're remaking She's All That to He's All That. They're just swapping the genders. It's still going to be the exact same plot of, oh, they got to bet and like get this frumpy person, to become popular.
Okay.
Still
So
the
I would
exact
say,
same thing,
I
but
would say
more modern actors.
right, but I would say probably a remake on that.
No,
you
that's
know?
what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Perfect example of a remake. It's following the exact plot line to a T, basically.
Right, or even remake the Lord of the Rings trilogy is now being remade into a Amazon series.
What about The Hobbit?
But-
Hobbit was an animated movie first.
but is
True.
it being
True. So
remade, or is it being just expanded upon?
No, it's
like they're gonna retouch on the story again.
it's going to retouch the story. It's going to follow the Frodo storyline,
But
it's
then-
going to be an Amazon series. So instead of being 3 movies that are
but
end to end 13 hours long, it's going to be I don't know, like
To do this argument here, then in this instance, Spider-Man. Every
that's
time,
reboots.
every
Reboots.
time they've done it, and they've retouched on the origin story again.
On
It's
just
considered
the
a
origin
reboot.
story, though, on just the origin
So
story.
is this a reboot of Lord of the Rings that's turned into a television show versus a remake?
I'm gonna say remake still.
If they're still following the same plot from beginning to end, I think it's a remake. But if it's the origin story for the character, just because you can tell so many different versions of
So
that.
actually, I'll answer it in two different ways. From the Tobey Maguire movies to Andrew Garfield remake,
Yes.
but the Tom Holland
It's a
Spider-Man
reboot.
is a reboot because it is now in the MCU. That's my thinking on it. Those
'Cause it launched another-
Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man was a remake. The new Spider-Man movies is a reboot because it's rebooting the character back into the MCU with all of the other.
So I guess before we'd have to know more about what the Lord of the Rings television show is doing from start to
Yeah,
finish in
before
order
we
to
can
know
determine.
if it's a
Yeah.
reboot or a remake. Because if it does branch off at all, then
Well,
it's a reboot.
It's
at that
probably
point.
going to follow more closely to the book than. Now, don't get me wrong. The movies did a fantastic job, but there was no like Tom Bombadil. Wow, Lord of the Rings fans are gonna murder me over this. I can never say that guy's name. But there were a lot of scenes and just great storytelling in the books that went way into detail that the movies didn't really venture off to. Like there's not like some storylines like at the end. The hobbits didn't go back to the Shire and everything was all hunky-dory. When they returned to the Shire, Saruman...
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers for the book. Saruman...
I'm gonna read it someday.
Saruman actually escaped Isengard and went to the Shire and enslaved them because it was revenge for what the hobbits and Gandalf and all of them did at Helm's Deep and at Isengard. He escaped and he basically took over the Shire. So a year later, after the hobbits come back, they now have to rescue their town and their people.
Oh, poor Frodo. Will he ever catch a break?
Yeah, exactly. It was like, okay,
That whole thing, by the way, because I'm the horrible filmmaker that has not seen Lord of the Rings, so that was a whole nother
God.
language
So
for me.
This is what I'm thinking. Like maybe they will kind of pick up at that point and tell that part of the story in the show. And I hope they do.
I think in this series it will show
Yeah.
that. Like it's going to go through I think it will be a remake / reboot actually because it's going to be a series, right? It's not going to go through the whole story of Lord of the Rings in one season. They may expand it out to like I don't know. It
7?
Depends on how popular it is. Maybe 7. We'll see. I don't know.
That'd be nice.
Game of Thrones did 7 seasons, so.
But
we'll
I
see.
feel like they're gonna, based off of what you're saying, because I haven't really heard a whole lot about it. If they're gonna follow similar plot points, then I feel like it kind of becomes more of a remake. But maybe towards the end, once they run out of that storytelling from the movies, it'll transition to a reboot almost in a way because they'll be expanding on that story.
True, and here's the thing. Tolkien has written so much more than what is in the what's in the actual book. All of the appendices go into much more details about the kingdoms and actually even the epilogues of some of these characters.
Whoa.
Hundreds of years in the future, there's a whole other book like the Silmarillion or something like that goes into even more stuff. So there is so much that they can really do with it.
I just
it's
think
not
it's-
just the Frodo story. Like it's kind like it. Once the War of the Ring ends and Frodo, after his story, there's so much more which they could
And
get
I
into.
love that. That
Yeah.
sounds. I love that there's no real solid conclusion to this universe. Almost,
Right.
it just issues just keep happening.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that the definition is something that is so adaptable that like, especially with television, that it can be a remake at 1st and then at any given time turn into a
Turns into a
reboot.
reboot.
Yeah.
Like it's not always set in stone with that. Whereas a movie, I think you have to be more cut and dry on the intent in order for it to be.
Well,
reboot or
again,
remake.
look, going back to television, we've talked about these examples before, like Fuller House and Girl Meets World. They were reboots, but also kind of remakes. Like at the very beginning, like think about like Fuller House, same house. almost the exact same. It's the same characters, just they're grown up and they're kind of going through the same roles.
But
that,
I would
that,
say
that
that's a
Danny did.
reboot.
Because they're expanding
Yeah.
upon
Because they're
a story.
expanding.
Right.
It's the same
It's
actor.
expanding.
It'd be
There's
different
their
if they
story.
did remade Boy Meets World and there was a new actor playing Corey and there
Okay.
was
Then that
different
would
nowadays
be-
struggles.
that
Like
would be
has no
remake.
connection to the Corey that we grew up with.
Right,
It's
okay.
a brand new Corey
because
that's
now
going
we see
through.
him as a
Yeah.
dad. You know, like the character
Right, we're seeing him
itself
as a
didn't
dad, but his
change.
daughter's going through almost the same kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It's just more modern. Now it's cyberbullying.
Yeah, they're
and-
rebooting the issues. That's kind of where
Right.
it becomes more of a reboot than a remake because
Right.
they've still got all the same characters. They're just
But I
rebooting a lot
guess
of the
in
same.
my mind, it's just the settings are
Yeah.
basically the remakes. You know, it's the same house, it's the same issues, or you know, it's a young person going through school.
It's the same
And they
universe.
have,
yeah, it's the same plot.
yeah,
points.
but it's like, you know, oh, you have
Yeah.
the same teacher throughout your entire schooling.
Well, and then you look at things like the Dark Crystal. Like that just got rebooted basically,
Right.
and there's no question about that being a reboot or
Yeah.
a remake
Yeah.
because it literally expands upon from where the
Yeah.
movie
Right.
left
Well,
off.
I would say it's technically a sequel series because it's
Yeah.
supposed to be the sequel to the movie.
But I mean, considering the time difference and that it is like a new
Right.
format,
Right.
I'd say it's more of a reboot because they are picking up where that story left off almost, and then just kind of like saying, "Oh, now this is what's happening based off of those events that happened."
So, at what point, I guess, to kind of finish this this discussion off, at what point do we just say enough of the remakes, enough of the reboots? When is too much? Well, too much.
I'll tell you right now, it's when they take away the actual like enjoyable parts of the films. Like I said earlier, when you take away the cultural part of the film that is based around that culture,
Right.
it's no longer a remake to me. It just is your own thing that you're creating on your own, and it sucks.
When I would honestly say that there just needs to be some sort of window that's agreed upon to where something is a remake versus like you don't need to remake something that was done
15 years
2
ago.
years ago or 3 years ago. Like
Right.
do it with something that again was made 40 years
Scarface.
ago. Do it that
Right,
was
Scarface was like
Yeah, I see.
Decades.
40 years
I would
after
love-
the yeah.
I would love it if people took older movies from that time period, or even from like
Right.
this 40s or 50s. Like,
Uh-huh.
I'd love to see a remade Chinatown. I would love that. I'd love to see a remade. Is it Here Comes Baby or whatever? With the little Jaguar thing. Like, I would love to see that in like modern times versus
Right.
having
Or like
to
Holiday Inn.
Yeah, or Holiday Inn or White Christmas. I think that
Yeah.
would be a great one to remake.
So I think yeah, if you give yourself the window enough to let it settle before you stir it up again and do that, I think that's
Don't do
what we need
something
to
that
do.
has a solid fan base
Yeah.
still.
True too, and yeah, cult classics, all those things, kind of untouchable. Don't.
Yeah.
Don't remake Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Well, they
Just
did.
don't. I know, but just
They-
don't.
but it's
And
like
but it's an
live
homage
action.
to the other one too, and
Yeah.
it was
Right.
a different purpose behind it. They
And it was
didn't
like
they
a
didn't
live
redo it to
musical.
yeah. They
Right.
didn't do
But
it
it
to
was-
make a new like
Media
Rocky Horror that
version.
everybody's gonna watch. They did it because it was a
homage,
fan base
yeah.
that they were.
And it was like
Right.
an anniversary thing too.
Right.
It was like a special for it.
But you know, it's just like nobody should ever remake Godfather, which I've heard rumors that some people
Never
wanted
gonna
to, and I'm
happen.
like, don't ever touch that, you know?
Real quick before we get off this topic, we also need to talk about the animation remakes that people make. They'll take really popular Pixar films and remake them into really low budget animated films because
Oh,
they'll
yeah.
just expect someone's grandma to not realize the difference between the
Oh
two.
yeah. Oh, it's been happening. That's been happening for
nonstop.
years. That's
All
been
the
happening for
time.
years. My in-laws gave us a bunch of like DVDs. Like, here you go, and half of them are like Snow White and like Prince Alibaba.
With horrible
yeah,
renders and yeah.
Food fight. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
like really sad versions of like the Disney classics.
Yeah.
And it's just horrible. But sometimes remakes can
They're
be
hit or
good.
miss.
And yeah, exactly. They're just hit or miss, and judge for yourself. Hopefully, they're just not cash cows. Some of them are. Not gonna lie. Yeah. Some of them are.
Most of them nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just our opinions. Let us know what you think about remakes and reboots, and maybe even some of your favorites or some of your least favorites.
Ooh,
Yeah. Comment your least favorite remake and reboots and tell us why. But we've got more episodes coming your way. We've got Bone Collector coming up in the next episode, and can't wait for that. And until then, keep vibing.
Bye, guys.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Let us know in the comments below what you think your favorite reboot is, or remake, or let us know what your thoughts about reboots and remakes. Is there a room for them, or is it just, enough too much, and is there just no originality in Hollywood anymore? You let us know in the comments below. Well, that's it for us in this video. Next week's episode, we're talking about Bone Collector, the movie Bone Collector, a new movie challenge for us. So you don't want to miss that. So go and watch it and come back next week while we discuss that movie. But until then, keep creating, build your brand, and go out there and tell your story.